Now lately it has come to my attention that some folks don't like healing taters. They don't recommend healing taters. They don't heal their taters, and I'm not really sure why. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope everybody out there is having a phenomenal day. It is Saturday, March 11th. Beautiful day here in South Georgia, low 70s, sun shining, a little bit of breeze outside. And got a couple things we need to do in the garden today, a couple things I want to tell you about. So we're going to start off by healing some taters in one of our raised beds there. Then we're going to go check on our mulberry tree, see if we're going to get any mulberries this spring. And then last, we're going to head over there to the back of the property and talk about fig tree spacing. How far apart should you put your trees, considering how big they're going to get. So the first thing on the list is to heal this little double row of taters here in this raised bed. Those over there still kind of popping through. These right here are growing really fast, and I was waiting on this one plant right there to get big enough so I didn't end up covering it up when I healed all the rest of these, and now I think it's big enough where we can do it. Now lately it has come to my attention that some folks don't like healing taters. They don't recommend healing taters. They don't heal their taters, and I'm not really sure why. I love healing taters. That's one of the most fun parts about growing taters, is covering up with soil. And I've also found we get better production if we heal them. Last year in our in-ground tater plot, I had a few plants that came up late and I didn't heal them, and we got a pretty poor harvest from those plants compared to the ones that we mounded soil up around. So I thought maybe this is a good time to kind of explain how taters grow, where the taters are actually made on the plant. So if we look at this nice pretty plant right here, down here in the soil we have our seed potato piece. I can feel it down there with my finger. Now all your taters are going to form right here along this stem that's exposed right now. We're going to cover it up in a minute. If you've ever pulled up a mature tater plant, you've noticed that your taters are sitting above the seed piece. The seed piece is usually still there, still connected to the plant, but it's always below all the taters you're going to harvest. So that tells us taters are forming up here above the seed piece, and if we want more taters to form and we don't want them to be exposed to the sunlight, we need to start covering up this stem. Now I've also seen some people say you don't need to heal determinate potatoes, you only need to heal indeterminate potatoes, which brings us back to that whole confusing discussion of the differences between a determinate potato variety and an indeterminate potato variety. Now if you recall one of those videos we did with Jim at Wood Prairie Farm where we got our seed potatoes, he said that a vast majority of the varieties out there today available online are all determinates. There are some older kind of heirloom varieties that are indeterminates, but if you're buying seed taters online, there's a good chance you're growing all determinates. I think all the varieties we have are considered determinate. How many ever we've got, 8 or 9 different varieties. I don't think I'm growing any indeterminates, but down here we treat them both the same. So those longer maturing potato varieties, aka indeterminate potato varieties, aren't indeterminate everywhere. Potato plants don't like 90 degrees. They don't like real hot temperatures. Once early summer rolls around, all of our potato plants will bite the dust. Wouldn't matter whether they were determinate, indeterminate, the heat is going to zap them, and we're going to need to harvest our taters. Now if you live somewhere with a mild summer, or maybe you're growing your taters in a nice cool shaded area, you might can get some indeterminate type growth from some of those varieties. But around here usually just means they'll be ready to harvest a couple weeks later than all the rest of the taters were growing. So I would say don't get caught up in all the determinate versus indeterminate hoopla with taters. But if you understand how tater plants grow, where the taters are produced, makes good sense to heal them all, whether they're determinate, indeterminate, whether they're early maturing, mid maturing, or late maturing. Heal them all, and I think you'll have a better harvest. The only exception to that would be if you're just going to plant them real deep to start with. If you're planting them 8 or 10 inches deep to start with, you might not need to hill them. But if you're just planting them a few inches deep, yeah, probably going to need to add some soil to those plants. So because we planted these taters in a trench, we've got plenty of soil here we can use to start covering up these plants a little bit. We don't have to go get the wheelbarrow, bring any more soil in, at least today. We'll see what happens as they continue to grow. If this gets leveled out and they're still getting pretty tall, we may add some more soil to this bed. But today, all we're really doing is just kind of backfilling all this soil that we moved out of the way when we made this trench. So I'm just going to kind of start pushing it towards these plants here. Going to kind of get some down the middle of that double row there. That way I'm not just pushing these 2 rows together here. There's our irrigation right there that we're not using on these taters. Pull some from up top here. I wasn't 100% sure that this whole process was going to work great, but it seems to be working pretty well so far. Nice way to do it without having to bring in a whole lot of extra dirt. So another question we get a lot from first-time tater growers is, how tall do you hill them and how often do you do it? So you can hill them as high as you want. You just don't want to cover up all the leaves on any given plant. Now usually in this first hilling, the height at which I do it is restricted by the smallest plant. So that's that little one I showed you earlier that was only a few inches tall. I didn't want to cover that one up, so I basically got to the top of that one. I could have put some more soil around these others, but we'll just wait till they all grow. They'll all kind of catch up to one another in a few weeks. And as they grow, you can hill them as many times as you want to. Now, if you make a tater hill that's 4 foot tall, I'm not so sure that's going to be any more productive than a tater hill that's, say, 20 inches or 2 foot tall. But hilling taters is a great way to suppress weeds along the row in between the plants. So if you want to do it just for that purpose, go for it. Not going to hurt the tater plants at all. Now the soil in this bed has sank down a little bit from when we first filled it back in the fall. I can kind of tell that by the time we hill this other row over here, once it emerges completely, that we're still going to be able to add a little soil. So once everything comes up in this bed, once it gets leveled out completely from hilling, I might add some more soil to this bed, at least until it gets level with the top of the bed there. Just keep adding some more to these plants as they grow. And now let's make a little 180-degree pivot from our raised beds and go check on that mulberry tree right there. Now, I don't know the name of this mulberry tree variety, and I don't know how old it is, but I know it makes us happy when we get some good production from it. You can see Titus done set him up a chair right there so he can stand on, reach up there and pick some of them. Now, in years when it produces, these mulberries are the first fruits of the year that we get. It produces before blackberries, produces before our figs come in. Now, I don't know if this is a variety thing or just how mulberries perform in the South, but our tree and everybody else I know around here that has a mulberry tree gets that early spring production, and then they're done. They don't make any mulberries for the rest of the year. Now, one time we took a tour of Stark Brothers over in Missouri sometime in the middle of the summer, I believe it was, and they had a variety there, a big tree variety called Illinois Everbearing, I believe, and they said it just produces all summer long. So like I said, I don't know if it's just this variety that's one and done, or mulberries don't really care for our heat. That's why they produce in early spring and then they're finished. Now, not a lot of them have turned ripe yet. You can see all those there are still pretty red. But this tree is loaded down this spring, which has my hopes pretty high. Now, two things can happen that can cause us not to get any mulberries, and I've seen both things happen several times in the 10 years we've lived here. So the first thing would be a late frost, especially if it was kind of a hard freeze. Last year, this is what happened. Got a lot of flowers on this tree, got a late freeze, kind of zapped the tree, never even saw any mulberries. The other thing that can happen is if we get a big storm rolling through here when the tree has berries loaded down on it like it does now. So if we get a lot of heavy winds, a lot of heavy rain, it'll blow all those red berries to the ground. They won't ever ripen, and we don't get a whole lot of mulberries. But I think this year is going to be a good year, assuming this little storm we're supposed to get tomorrow on Sunday doesn't knock them all off the tree. We usually don't get skunked 2 years in a row. We at least get some mulberry production every other year. Sometimes we get good production 2 years in a row. Now, I didn't find any that were completely ripe up there. Titus claims he's been eating a lot of them. I think he's probably been eating some that weren't quite ready. So these two here are close. They're not quite there. You can still see a little bit of red on them. You want to wait till they turn completely black. But there's a pretty small harvest window on these things. Once they do turn completely black and get nice and sweet, they'll fall off the trees pretty easily. So we got to come out here pretty much every afternoon and pick mulberries if we want to get enough to make a nice batch of jelly. This one here, I can tell already, is probably pretty sour. Yeah, it is. Still not bad, but probably needed a few more days. Now let's transition from talking about mulberries to figs. You can see our fig orchard here behind me, putting on a lot of leaves, putting on a lot of new growth, starting to look really, really pretty. And we've been getting a lot of questions from people who have either purchased trees from us already or thinking about it, asking, do they have to be in full sun? How much space do I need to give them? If I'm planting them in a pot, how big of a pot do I need to use? So let's start with the sunlight discussion. You want to try to plant your fig tree in an area that gets full sun throughout the day. So if you've got several different spots on your property to pick from, pick the area that gets the most sun. Now you can plant them in a partially shaded area and they'll do just fine. But they like full sun and you'll get a lot more growth from them if they're in full sun. Now my fig orchard is almost full sun. Gets a little bit of morning shade from those pine trees there. If those were my pine trees, they wouldn't be there. So I'm not in complete full sun with my orchard here, but we still get a ton of growth from it, even with a little bit of morning shade. Now let's talk about tree spacing. So we've had some people order multiple trees. They want to start them a little fig orchard, kind of like what we've got here. Other people have limited space and they don't want their tree to get so big that it becomes an obstruction in their limited space. So they want to know kind of how much space they need to give that tree there. So first, let me show you just how big a fig tree can get. So this is a brown turkey tree. It's probably at least 30 years old. Never really been heavily pruned. I do clip some of those side limbs from time to time so they don't hit me in the head when I'm cutting the grass. But this is what you'll get if you just let it grow. Eventually, it takes many, many years or decades to get to this point. But this tree is probably 20 foot or so in diameter, so they can get pretty dang big. Now fig trees love to put out these sucker limbs at the base of the tree, just like we see here. So all this green growth is 1 to 2 year old growth. Unlike a tomato sucker, we'll get a lot of figs off this growth right here this year. But if I don't come in here every couple years and prune this back a little bit, the footprint of this tree will just keep getting wider and wider and wider. Now on the other side of the county, at my buddy's parents' house, they've got a big tree like this, and they just kind of let the suckers run out. And if you let them run out far enough, they'll kind of fall on the ground, root, and almost form like another fig tree. And so they've just got this fig jungle. It's hard to even tell where the original tree or the main trunk of the tree is. Reminds me a lot of those mangroves in Florida. It's just this forest full of figs, and they get production kind of all throughout it. So if you've got plenty of room on your property, bunch of wide open space, and you're just wanting to plant 1 or 2 trees, you can just let it grow, get as big as it wants to get. But if you are limited on space or don't want the tree to get quite that big, you can aggressively prune it. Not going to hurt the tree at all. Now if you want to have a little mini orchard like we have here and plant multiple trees, you might want to do it a little differently. Now where our fig orchard sits used to be all pine trees, just like that right there. Those pine trees are actually the edge of our property. So what I did is I went in there, cut all those pine trees down, left a little stub of a stump, and I planted a fig tree between each stump. I think the spacing somewhere between about 8 to 10 foot apart between the trees. Now, I was confident we could get away with planting these trees that close because I knew when we planted these 3 or 4 years ago, the end goal was to eventually take a bunch of cuttings from each tree every year, heavily prune them so we could reproduce the trees. Now, if I was growing these fig trees solely for fruit production, if I wasn't taking cuttings and reproducing the plants, probably would have put the trees further apart, probably 15 to 20 foot apart or so. So it just depends on what the goal is for your fig orchard. If you're starting one, if you're going to be taking a lot of cuttings, if you don't mind pruning the trees back every year, you can get away with a closer spacing. But if you're just going to let the trees grow and sprawl and do their thing, you might want to give them a little extra room. So I hope you enjoyed the video today. I'm going to go play around outside a little more, enjoy this beautiful weather before the rain comes in here tomorrow. And let me know in the comments below if you've ever grown any mulberries or have a mulberry tree. Does yours produce just one time in early spring? Does it produce year round? Is it a varietal thing or is it a climate thing? And as always, you can find links to all our affiliate partners in the description below. Got some coupon codes for some of those companies so you can take advantage of those discounts. Don't forget to go check out our website, lazydogfarm.com, where we have the fig trees for sale, got a few seeds for sale, our garden blog, recipes, all kind of good stuff over there. If you did enjoy the video, be sure to subscribe, hit that notification button, like, and share, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.
Farewell, by the beauty of your life.